Hey everyone, today's conversation is going to be about research, hopefully a little bit about children's research, especially in times of COVID. That has taken on its own importance. So if you are in research, if you are a clinician, if you are a child advocate, if you are in medical affairs, you probably care about today's discussion. Our guest today is the Director of Research Operations and Administration. She is a friend of mine, a former student, and at this point, just plain impressive. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today is Erin Sandene. This is the Darshan Talks live stream. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. Having said that, I'm not your attorney, I'm not your pharmacist, so neither Erin nor I are giving you any legal, clinical, or regulatory or research-based advice. These are just conversations and considerations. But if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe, please share. Please feel free to reach out and ask our guests questions. Last time around, Erin had several people asking questions, and I can't wait to see what comes out this time. You can always reach out to me on Twitter, and just go to Darshan Talks on Twitter. Just go to our website at darshantalks.com. You can actually reach Erin at erin.sandene@childrenscolorado.org. So, Erin, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Busy, and it's been a very, very busy start of the year. I hear that it's been very slow at Children's Hospital. Things have just calmed down. Nothing's changed. I think it's been since the start of COVID, things have died down. Is that right?
Yep, we're just twiddling our thumbs over here, just drinking coffee.
I'm not even going to comment, but I'm really glad to hear. So it sounds like things have been really busy. Things have been really exciting. Talk to me about what you guys are doing up there.
Sure. Right now we're really focused. So we are a pretty large research site. I would say one of the biggest in the country, if not the biggest pediatric site in the country. We have over 100 people within our current team, with goals to expand into what's called the Child Health Research Enterprise Infrastructure, which is kind of a global centralized team that would essentially support all types of research being done in the pediatric space. And that could be, neonate or actually fetal research all the way through the adult side. We do see some adult patients, especially in the congenital heart or genetic research. But our big goal is actually to put together this super center infrastructure where we're all doing things the same way, where we're using the same policies, we're using the same documentation practices, we're doing everything from a regulatory and research operations perspective the same way, to cut down on deviations, but just to make things easier for the teams as a whole and to help them optimize their science, and especially to help our PIs and faculty to optimize the work that they want to do, and just remove the barriers. So that's where we're going. A lot of that is, financial, trying to put together systems and models, regulatory systems and models. There's no lack of moving parts. We have a really, really, really big effort right now on contracts. We have thankfully employed an awesome assistant general counsel in our research contracting space, because I think there is kind of a misunderstanding in the past that research contracting is the same as any other type of contracting at a medical level. And it is a whole different animal. And I think you can't pretend that research contracting and just kind of make it apples to apples. So now we have someone, Darshan, I know that you know this more than anyone. We have someone that has expertise in that space, which has really allowed us to move forward, be nimble, accept some risk, but also just understand the implications of the contracts we're executing and negotiating. So name it, we're doing it. No lack of work and no lack of change on a daily basis, and just pushing on. And also in the context of COVID, trying to navigate how to support our staff and ourselves from a mental health standpoint and space standpoint and all those things. Every day it changes. I hate to give advice to anyone about this is what it's going to look like next week, because next week might change. But I would say everyone's doing a great job, continuing to push forward.
That's so exciting. So let's start from the beginning there. You talked about how you guys are trying to become a super center and create a super center infrastructure. First of all, that sounds amazing. So tell me what that even means, first of all.
Sure. I guess it's our kind of understanding that there's so many small hospitals doing small amounts of work, and we want to be, the best, not one of the best at doing what we do. And in order for that to be sustainable, we feel like it has to be the model that we develop has to, one, pay for itself, but also has to have, a lack of variance in how we support the work. Our goal is to optimize what everyone's doing within their specified research area, but just give them an infrastructure, give them the templates, give them, this is how to put in an IRB application. These are our experts in that space, an IND, an IDE, all of these little, nuances about research, just to provide all of that to optimize their work. And so from a super center's perspective, it's just going to be ultimately a huge team that's working off the same playbook. That's all we want to do is provide, this is how you do your job in this space, and always be educating to the newest changes from a regulatory compliance standpoint, and just doing the best at what we do. And really for us, it's all about our patients. And I think having a super center, having so much work, also means we have resources and we can be nimble to all the needs that our patients have. In that space, specifically over the last 3 years, telehealth has changed the way we do everything, right? Sending out investigational drug to specific, places, whether it's the middle of Montana or it's someone, right in your backyard. We've been able to kind of, change some of our processes and look at it differently because we have the resources to do so. Whereas I think smaller sites can't do that because they aren't supported in the way that we're supported. So we have a large investment from our hospital system and from the School of Medicine. And I think because we do what we do well, we can recruit faculty, and it's just a cycle of optimization because we have great PIs and we have a great team and we do great work, and then it keeps going and going and going.
So you talk about creating this super center. How do you distinguish that from a few different things that I can think of? One version would be basically an SMO, because you'd be providing a infrastructure for other doctors' offices, smaller hospital sites to attach onto and learn from, and sort of don't have to build their own infrastructure. So that's one version. The other version that I can see is creation of a decentralized platform. And the idea being, what I think an SMO is almost a bolt-on versus a decentralized structure is almost a reorganization of the group. So what do you see as the future for Children's Hospital of Colorado?
I think it's less about control and more about optimization.
Okay.
So I think the ultimate goal is seeing what everyone is doing to have the best output for their specific disease type and or for whatever they are researching, and providing the necessary elements to support their outcome. In that space, I think for us, it's always about safety and clean data. And so, we really do look at metrics, and we look at ways, times two, and completing our work and making sure from a financial standpoint, the work that we're doing is feasible to be continually completed. We want to make sure we're getting paid for the work we're doing. It's not costing the institution. And that is something that a lot of other people aren't doing. So I don't see it necessarily as decentralized, like everyone do your own thing. And this, and will somehow contribute here. I think it's more of a centralized platform with people having the ability to be nimble in their specific space and nuance in their specific space and doing the best way they can, because all the disease groups are different and all the patient groups are different and where they're located are different. So we need to be thoughtful and open to meeting them where they are. One thing that's really interesting about the work that we do is our faculty are employed by the university, and we are a nonprofit. So I think one of the bigger things when I talk to you in the past about having, an educator role or even empowering people with the knowledge about the research infrastructure upstream, I think it's really important for people to understand the different like legal implications of where they're actually doing the work. Yeah. And so that is something we're really, really focusing on right now. And one of the things we did is create this, what's called a Centralized Research Review Committee. And it has, privacy, your information security, lab, compliance, legal, operations, everyone in the same room. And when we have a specific study where data or materials are being transferred, we have to look at the implications between that going from a nonprofit institution that's not covered by state law, really, and then, but it could be going right next door to University of Colorado, which is under state law. And so just even explaining the different contracts that are necessary, what can be shared, what's protected. We are so protective of our patients. And I think that sometimes gets in the way of being successful in our research. So I think it's just really melding those two together and making sure we're doing the exact right thing for the patients, but making sure we're able to move the needle forward on the innovation and the research itself. So that's just one example of the complexities that no one even understands. They see it as a barrier, as opposed to we're following the rules of the law as much as we possibly can to protect our patients and their information.
So you said this interesting thing, which is you're seeing a centralized optimization process is how you see the role of this, and I love the term, so I'm going to keep going back to it, of the supercenter infrastructure. So if that's true, do you find yourself going, how do we optimize? Oh, I'm hearing my own voice. There's an echo coming through. But how do we optimize it in that, if the future, you mentioned telehealth, for example, one of the big conversations I've seen being had is CVS is saying we want to get into the clinical research world, and you're seeing Walgreens trying to get into it. Do you see your future competition being smaller hospitals that you're going to educate and sort of teach, or is it a CVS saying I can work? I have the patient lists. I can directly do research and send patients from CVS and send nurses or the like, or PAs to the patient's homes, and the patient never has to leave the house. So what is competition for Children's Hospital?
I don't think you can completely get rid of a centralized model where patients have to engage with their rare disease specialist, their physician themselves, right? A lot of the research we do is really based upon the fact of these relationships they have with their primary, subspecialty physician. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that completely being removed. What I hope we're doing is melding the two together, where you have that extremely important, valuable person who's always advocating for what's coming down the pike, what can we be offering to our patients, along with ways to optimize people to engage in research. So if they're going to CVS to get a blood draw, we're sending nurses to their houses. We're allowing, monitoring, device monitoring that can be done remotely. We combine those together, and what I guess my vision would be is very much to we have what's called network of care sites. I would love for every single person that is literally, in my neighborhood that has the opportunity to participate in research to be able to participate in every single one of those studies, regardless of where they live in the 7th State region, because we've put in place like different operational capabilities to support them and meet them where they are. And so we're going to have to meld that. How that works, I'm not super sure. My dog is having a nervous breakdown, so let him out. One second.
Wow.
Okay. Apologize, Darshan. It's snowing outside, so that's a new fun thing for him.
Oh, is he a puppy?
He's a little bit over a year now, but he loves the snow. So I think that's what he wanted. I apologize. So I think it's just all of those things, right? I have huge concerns about people going into homes. I think we need to be thoughtful about, being in people's spaces and safety issues, but we're missing a really big opportunity to engage people across the US because they can't physically get to our site, whether it's a financial, or transportation situation or even school. So that would be my legacy. I hope it more to be, take what we're doing in Aurora or in Denver, do it in Colorado Springs, do it in Montana, do it in Utah, and then kind of recruit people internally. I think it'll be a mix of both. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
What I think just talking to you, I think a really interesting future perspective could be that these maybe CVS and Walgreens, maybe they have their own thing, but you might reach out to a sorry, my dog found his toy, so that's, I apologize for noise. But you might reach out to an independent pharmacy and say, you have a patient's list. Why don't we join hands? We'll train you. You become a site to hold drug, to find your patients, to advocate for them, and that becomes a new modern. I haven't seen this done before, but it could be a whole new way of connecting pharmacists to research in a way that's never happened before. But has that been a thought that's come across your table, or?
Yeah, we've engaged people in pretty remote places. Definitely some transplant patients where we've had to connect the two that, they can't physically get here. One of the things that I came up with, I've done this in both Pittsburgh and here, is develop a partnership with Quest to where that, they're the place that's actually doing, standard safety labs, right? And then they're billing us back.
Yeah.
And I will say our biggest complication with all of this, decentralized process is that our systems are driven by how they've been developed, and they're not necessarily nimble to what we want them to do, right? So it's our financial systems, it's our electronic medical record, right? The capture, the intake. And sometimes thinking through all the nuances of that is where you bang your head. If you could do it on paper, you could do it, but everything is computerized, and so if it isn't coded the right way, or and then people, so that is where I spend a lot of my time on the IT or clinical application services, trying to articulate the need. And that is new because there's not a ton of work that's been done in the pediatric space to support that type of system.
That's incredible. So you're doing such cutting edge work that the systems haven't caught up to what you're trying to achieve, which is amazing. But you, as part of that, you spoke about creating this network, and as part of creating this network, we spoke a little bit about pharmacies. We spoke a little bit about small hospitals, but another piece of that network is patients. And how do you draw from patients? You mentioned about drawing from patients all over the country. Could you talk a little bit about how you identify what patient populations you have? How do you ensure that you're meeting? You talk about meeting patients where they are. From a DEI perspective, have you done any kind of research to identify who your patients are and if their needs are being met?
Sure. I think so. One, I want to start by saying the DEI perspective and the relationship perspective of who your patients are why I don't believe a decentralized model will totally work.
Interesting.
Because in order to do research, you need very, very clean data, and things are so nuanced and so particular. I believe you have to have a full relationship with patients to understand what they're telling you and to be comprehensive in what you're capturing. So if you're doing it at a site where you don't have a relationship and someone's not hugely invested in that work, I think you're missing the picture. I think you're missing the story as a whole. So I think that's one reason why for certain drugs or devices, it might be functional. For things that's, 80% of what we're looking at, which is rare diseases, pediatric rare diseases as a whole, it's a little nuanced. So 1. 2, I think there's so much possibility for us to enroll patients that are not your typical pediatric research patients. And where I say that is a lot of who we see at Children's external to Colorado are patients whose parents are researching, best next steps for their child. They are engaged, educated, super motivated to get access. If you are working a 12-hour shift every day and you cannot even put food on the table or don't know how you're going to get your kid to school every day, you're probably not on the internet scouring or having, health consultants trying to look on the next best research clinical trial for your child to participate in. Some people don't have the luxury of spending a ton of time looking for, what is cutting edge, what is innovated in that space. And I think we need to acknowledge that for the COVID vaccine trial, Pfizer and us, we did, COVID vaccine trial 5 to 11 years of age. They did a radio commercial. There were things via text, Instagram, Facebook, and we had to shut down the site of people that were interested in enrolling. So we had over 5,800 people within 2 days offer to have their kids participate in the trial. And it was not your typical population that we see at Children's, which is typically Caucasian and middle to upper income from a socioeconomic status. We then took those 5,800 people and had them self-identify, their demographics. And from there, made sure that we were engaging and capturing a population that mimicked Aurora, where our hospital is, which has a very, very large Hispanic population, a pretty large Asian population. So we mimicked that, and then we exceeded. We wanted to say, who enrolls in this trial, the 250 kids, need to look like exactly the same demographics of what's around our hospital. And we did that. And we exceeded the numbers, which was amazing. It's the first time we've ever really been able to do that. But doing that took translators. It took multiple phone calls and resources. It took the ability to make sure people got here, rescheduling, people on site. It took our child health staff to be able to navigate people, kids that might have been on the autism spectrum, that they needed some more nuanced support. It took a lot of extra work. It definitely, we're so happy we did it. There's no reason we wouldn't have done it. But with the extra resourcing comes dollars, one. And we also had a process improvement specialist, a project manager, and we had the unending support of our, executive staff. So if you don't, if you have to be able to put your money where your mouth is and actually really follow through with what you say you're going to do in that space. And I think in order to meet people on the, like I say, 7-state region, we're going to have to put an extra effort. We're going to have to make it happen. We're going to have to get into places and travel to places that we wouldn't normally be, which also means, where do you put your freezers? Where are you putting aliquots, your centrifuges? Where can you travel with samples in your car? Are you in the middle of, there's all these really cool things to navigate. But we need to do it to make the science, I think, fit the global population or the general population. I'm just super excited. I think it speaks to the fact that people are engaged. If we can meet them where they are, they want to be a part of it, whether it's, even as a control. So I was really excited. Our board has gotten feedback from who we enrolled, and they were very excited. And so I'm really hoping that maybe philanthropy is a way that we achieve some of these goals. And that makes me very excited.
So we have Ellen Budenko, who first makes a comment, and then there's a follow-up question. So addition of the active parties like CVS, Walgreens, LabCorp ultimately helps to increase patients' access to clinical trials. It's a good thing. Ultimately, when the dust settles, the patients will naturally connect and continue their trials that are the most convenient and beneficial, which speaks to how do you do it? And to that point, she asks, what platforms and tools is your organization currently using or planning to use?
So everything, we're not doing anything. We're not doing a ton of work outside of the Denver space right now. What we continue to say, even when we're being engaged right now in Colorado Springs work, we're saying we need to get our house in order before we deploy this to other places. But we've looked at different, we do use right now, we use Encore as our system. We use Epic, but I think, we have engaged multiple monitoring tools and telehealth tools and remote access in many, many ways. I think this is more of a TBD. I 100% agree that they're going to go where it's easiest and most beneficial, which is why I think it needs to be a blend. They still need to have a primary physician that understands their disease process, right? They still need to be physically on site to be evaluated to make sure, that from a safety perspective, that they're moving forward in the way they should be, and that is beneficial for them to continue or not, and then to move to something else. And then we make all the other time points and all the other, whether it's procedures or evaluations, remote in some way, shape, or form. So they're getting the best of both worlds. I think it's also financially more sustainable from not just an industry side, from an NIH side, but also for the patients themselves. I mean, I cannot tell you how many cancellations we have simply for the fact that we can't allow siblings in the hospital right now. That's a real thing because, we have COVID visitation policies and people have to test out. So you have to make it easy, or you're never going to get, what you need, and you're never going to understand the research itself in totality. So I hope it's a mixture of both. Everyone needs it to be easier. And I think we've really learned from COVID that, we can make things a lot easier for everyone. I mean, we were able to do it. It's amazing how many laws and regulations got removed, and we just forged forward with what we had in the time of, where we are challenged. And so I hope we continue in that spirit. Like, ask why, keep challenging. Don't keep doing it because we've been doing it that way forever. That's what's made me most excited.
COVID has been interesting because for the most part, we discovered that what was holding us back was not so much the technology, but the will. And it's at a certain point, we kind of got to a point where we just went, there's no other option. We have to keep moving. So it gave us new things, new ideas, new opportunities. Speaking of those new opportunities, one of the things you mentioned a second ago is creating a broader perspective. And we spoke a little bit about the types of patients you have, and you tried to mimic the population of Aurora, for example. My first question to you is, when you tried to mimic that, did you worry about issues like randomization, and how do you make sure that it's blinded? Because in a certain way, you have to take anyone who comes through. But on the other side, you also are trying to make sure that from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, you're not excluding socioeconomically poor individuals, Hispanic patients who may not have had the same chance as a rich white person who happens to be close to the Aurora region. So how did you address that basic issue of blinding and randomization?
So, I mean, their demographics from a diversity standpoint, you had no play in, where they were randomized. Once they were on site, we had a total, like I said, 252 total patients, right? And if, for example, one of our Asian possible subjects of 3 brothers decided that they were going to cancel, we had backup lists, right? And it wasn't names, it was purely self-identification on how they identified themselves. I will say it was not without missteps. We forgot to put Native American as a selection, right? How completely offensive is that? And it was like, whoa, how did you miss that? But it was also just really, it was a good learning. We're learning, everyone's putting themselves out there. And it was great that people constantly gave feedback, whether they were offended or not. So we had a lot of learning, right? But so what we did is, we looked at it, and then based on their self-selection, that's how many people we had and how many we scheduled. And then if people canceled or didn't show up, we had backups and we brought them in. We live in a really, super educated, very scientific minded city. And we just didn't want it just to be purely our colleagues. Yeah. We didn't want it just to be, all Children's Hospital employees and their team. We wanted it to be representative of our community. And if it was the first 252 kids in, that might've looked different, but we had to open up to the whole group and then identify that way. And no one had names. So it was a lottery based upon diversity and equity to get to those numbers. Then randomization occurred once they were on site. So it didn't matter where you were from, what your identify, how you identified. You're randomized once you were there and you met the criteria to enroll in the trial. We did try to focus on, we did bring in siblings. There's just a ton of data that shows sibling pairs, they're more likely to go through the entire trial themselves. The data seems clean, as a whole. So we have multiple sibling dyads or triads, which is really cool because they're so excited about it, and they're doing it together. And, it was just really cool.
That's amazing. We've spoken a little bit about socioeconomic and race. Do you also look at gender identification and sexual identification in that diversity analysis, if you will?
Yeah, and we did, and we do at Children's. We actually have a transgender clinic at Children's. It's profoundly amazing the work that they're doing, and they're doing all all sorts of work from the endocrinology standpoint. But in this trial specifically, we had to be conscientious of people that were within childbearing age, and, consider those conversations. And that didn't come without complexities too, because you're still doing, we did pregnancy tests on anyone that had childbearing potential, even if that was an 11-year-old, right? It's pretty easy to say, oh, we don't want to have that conversation, right? But you can't, because those are the people that are being disproportionately affected by COVID as a whole. And so we definitely wanted to engage people within that population. And so we had to be conscientious of that. We had to have, uncomfortable conversations, as did those parents. And we let them know up front, and keeping an eye on that and having those conversations. So there have been conversations, I know, with, Pfizer about if someone identifies as one biological sex versus what they identify with, on a daily basis. How do you classify? I'm not sure where that all went, but I know that that wasn't exclusionary, because there was no, you can't have girls or versus boys, or you need this many or not. It was, the entry criteria was very, could be boys or girls, and it's 5 to 11, and these are the exclusions. But we thought about it. We had multiple conversations about it. And we do that every day in pediatric research, right? And we have STI research, or research from sexual abuse or non-traumatic, non-accidental trauma. There's things that we have to engage that people in the adult space typically aren't thinking about, because it's children or protections. And so there's all sorts of legal complexities and compliance complexities we face in that space anyway.
That's amazing. I do have one question from Ellen, and by the way, we're well over time, and I can easily spend another 2 hours talking to you, because you're always so fascinating. But this is more of a block and tackle question. Considering the complexity of what we're looking at, how long does it take to actually onboard new coordinators at your place?
Oh, Ellen, I think the coordinators would tell you 50 different answers to that question. And honestly, this is one of my biggest goals, is to standardize it more. We have a mixture within our team, which is called the Research Institute. There's probably 70 coordinators. I would say to function and walk in the door, it's like and get your basics of your job down. People have mentors, is 3 months. I would say, in my mind, it takes a full year to understand all the complexities, especially the documentation associated with being a coordinator, the nuances with the disease types, how you do everything. In our hospital, we have multiple teams. We have a Cancer and Blood Center group. We have an awesome breathing institute that does CF and asthma. And we have our team. And then we have a ton of what are called non-employee research staff that are actually employed at the university that are coming in to do work too. So they're onboarded a different way. So goal with these new educator positions is to get everything standardized. No matter who you are, you're doing it the same way. The documentation is the same, how you're onboarded, how you're credentialed, how you're trained, how that training is tracked, how you're communicated to is done transparently, and everyone's doing this. Because I would say, and I guess it's not embarrassing, it's honest to say, there are times now you could ask 3 different people how to do one thing, and they might give you a different answer. And I want to change that. I don't want there to be variance. I want everyone to stop using their brain power on things that are so simple and focus on optimizing the work.
Which speaks to the value of education. You've been talking about centralized education, and we've discussed that before. I can't remember if it was before we started this conversation or not. But the question I have with that is, how do you ensure that there's centralized education and still a facility-specific education as well? Do you use the use of like partners, or do you have additional facility-specific training on top of that? Like, what is your general process for that? Role-specific, but yeah.
So we have an electronic onboarding binder that is used, and kind of the different teams have different ones, and then people have a mentor. But there's differences in all of that too. We also have, we call it our research operations meeting, and that is for the house. So we have a centralized meeting that's an hour long every other month. And that's where all new updates in research, whether it's training, it's resources, it's how things are, changes that they're coming forth, initiatives that we're moving forward to make things easier, more comprehensive. That is the centralized place where everything is taught and communicated out. Anyone who has a research role is expected to either be present at that meeting, review the slide deck, or watch the video. We record it, we post it, and we share the slides with everyone. That is the information that they're beholden to follow, so they can say, oh, no one told me that. I'm like, well, you did. It was March of last year, and I have a read receipt, so you got it. So those are some of the main places. But I will say, I think our team is really excited and happy to partner with our PIs too. Like, the PIs should be very engaged in the studies. They should know what's going on. They should know how it's being done and making sure it's being, done the right way. And so there's a lot of communications and training inherent to the coordinators and the PI staff as a whole. And it depends on the different group, but that's a source of, I think, joy for a lot of our coordinators, that relationship, that ability to, write papers, publish, grow with patients. There's some really beautiful stories if we got into the behind the scenes. But I think that when we've done surveys, those relationships with PIs actually, I think, are the number one source of happiness for our coordinator teams.
Very interesting. We are, like I said, well over time. A couple of things that, as you know, I ask you. So the first question that I ask is, what is the best way for people to reach you?
Best way is Erin.Sandene at childrenscolorado.org or on LinkedIn there's only one Erin Sandene. I used to be Erin Kelly, and there was like 5,000 Erin Kellys, probably more, but there's only one Erin Sandene. So I'm always happy to answer anything on LinkedIn.
Very, very cool. What's something you'd like to ask the audience?
I don't know. I would love to know any positives or anything that's new, innovative, exciting that's happened in the COVID space. I think the thing that I get most excited about is the collaborative science and like the barriers that have been removed. We've published papers across the campus as groups together. I would love to hear stories of people coming together and like putting their egos aside to get the work done. So any of those stories or any really creative ways of getting work done is always great. I'd love to share those with my team as examples of what they could be mimicking in, making their research more functional.
So I'll give you one, but it's not the answer you want. It's the exact opposite of the answer you want. So apparently they just discovered that they've already found the next virus variant, and apparently it's in 40 countries already. So Omicron's old news. We've got the new one coming out. So
what's the name of that one?
I don't think they have a name yet. So all the countries are working together to come up with names and all this other stuff. So you wanted working together, you just didn't specify why. Unfortunately, here's the bad news that goes with it.
It's okay. I mean, there's so many cool platforms, data that has been shared, sites where people can input things together that wouldn't have happened in an from an academic medicine standpoint. People aren't super sharers, and all of a sudden there's those things, coming together. And I love that's my favorite part about COVID.
Well, I'm going to make sure I send you news on a routine basis. For example, again, the opposite of what you were looking for, but the FDA yesterday, I think, or maybe day before, I can't keep track, but the OIG and FDA went after researchers and CRAs for fraud. And there were some new ones. So I'll make sure I send you some of that information so that you can share that, say, this is not what you should be doing. So something to keep in mind with.
Well, yeah, it's in perspective. When we're doing great work, sometimes it feels like you're just trudging uphill, and it's like, no, we are doing amazing,
Very, very cool. Any parting words?
No, it's just good to see you. I'm always happy to jump on and always willing to learn more and listen. So, please share anything that you get your hands on. Hopefully see you in Colorado soon.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you again. Stay tuned. We'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Darshan. Have a great week.